Hi guys, my name's Jen, and for my cultural resume project, I chose the country of New Zealand. I'll be going over a few different items and different aspects of New Zealand: the land and climate, history and government, economy and transportation, communication systems, the people, the lifestyles of a Kiwi, communication styles, customs, and traveling and gestures. New Zealand is a archipelago that is located off the southeast coast of Australia in the Pacific Ocean. It's actually made up of two islands, the North and the South Island, with many other smaller islands in between and offshore. There are many different types of terrain and different topographies across the country, like mountains, volcanic plateaus, volcanoes, beaches, plains. And because of its location in the southern hemisphere, the and the different types of topography, New Zealand has a subtropical summer and very cold winters. New Zealand was settled about 1,200 years ago by the Maori, a Eastern Polynesian people. It was one of the last remaining landmasses on Earth to be settled in the modern world. The British began arriving to the country in the late 1800s, and subsequently New Zealand became a member of the British Commonwealth. And in exchange for protection and the guaranteed possession of their lands, the Maori ceded sovereignty to the United Kingdom in the 1840 Treaty of Waitangi, signed by 50 tribal chiefs and a British representative. From this point forward, the native Maori and their European counterparts have suffered great disparities in healthcare, education, and living standards. The government in control of the Labour Party currently has issues of inflation and unemployment since the last World War. The economy of New Zealand is heavily reliant on agriculture and tourism, along with the film industry. It was made popular by the Lord of the Rings trilogy as it was filmed there on location. There are many ways to get around the islands with immense public transport system and roads that take you in and out of cities. Communication and modern technology have increased in the New Zealand population, in the New Zealand nation with the turn of the century. Rapid expansion in communication technology, especially with the increase of computers and the internet, mobile, digital technology, have affected more traditional methods such as telephone and fax, particularly in a small country like New Zealand. Internet is a widely accessible commodity in the nation, and it's used by a great portion of the population. Mail and courier services are actually in reprieve. They only deliver a few days out of the week compared to the US's 7 days out of the week. The population of New Zealand, according to data in 2021, was approximately 5.1 million people in the country of New Zealand. It's considered a melting pot of native and immigrated cultures. Broadly speaking, there are four ethnic groups that are in New Zealand: the European, the Maori, the Asian, and the Pacific Islander. The Europeans have migrated here during the past 2 centuries and is comprised of 68% of the population. Maori is the native population of New Zealand, although due to disease and famine within the country during European immigration, their total population decreased to 15%. The remaining 17% is the Asian, Pacific Islander, and other populations. Although Pacific Islanders and the Maori share the same ancestry, they need to be viewed as separate entities. Like Europeans and Asians that have migrated to the country, the Maori people are considered native because they were the first to inhabit and therefore the native population of New Zealand. There are many differences between the family structure and the values between the native population of Maori and the European and Asian population of the country. The Maori, Pacific Islanders, and Asian populations are regarded as collectivist cultures. So this means that the emphasis is on the needs of the group rather than the individual. More specifically, the Maori culture is based upon the concepts of wahanu, family, hapu, extended family, iwi, which is the tribe, and waka, with the last term literally meaning canoe. signifying a unification of a common ancestor. The European population is highly individualistic, and while believing that they're the most important being within their culture, they're highly egocentric, meaning that they're in the habit of overemphasizing one's own culture as a template for assessing other cultures, and that's ethnocentrism, as we learned in class. More specifically, as Ferraro and Andretta note within our text, ethnocentrism is the belief that one's culture is superior to all others. The people of New Zealand are very proud of their culture and their heritage. As summarized by the national website geared towards tourism, the people of New Zealand, or Kiwis, a moniker used during World War I that's still accepted today, are people that appreciate their heritage and their community above all else. The Kiwis are dependable, egalitarian, global-minded, inventive, and have open minds towards the travelers to their country and the people that inhabit it. The Kiwi majority is often very politically correct, as shown by one of the first countries in the world to legalize same-sex civil unions within their country. Sorry. The most common languages spoken in New Zealand are English and Maori. Interestingly, after it was actively suppressed for years after colonization, today there are as many as 1,000 Maori words used regularly by non-native speakers. Maori words and phrases are common in the spoken and printed language of New Zealand, and recently the native language has been used in official legislation, like the words Takanda Wanua, the people of the land, and Iwi, the tribe, that have no English accommodation to them. Although there are many religious sects within the country, the main sects are denominations of Catholicism. Christianity was indoctrinated in New Zealand by the Church of England during the immigration during the 19th century. Originally, there was opposition to Christianity by the native Maori, but there are many Christian and Catholic churches in New Zealand today. A census taken in 2013 concluded that the majority of religious people in New Zealand are Catholic, but the variety of immigrants has meant that Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism have grown, although each has only around 50,000 followers, and Jews have been in the country since the 19th century as well. There are two main sects of religion for the Maori people, both roughly based on Christianity. Ringatu and Ratana both have Christian bases, but over time the Maori have added their own features. For instance, the Lord's Prayer might be said in English and Maori during resuscitation. The education system in New Zealand is similar to the education system in the United States. After starting school around 5, it is compulsory to go to school between ages 6 and 16. Secondary education, which Kiwis refer to as year 1, which is our kindergarten, through year 13, which is our senior year, is free public education and is paid for and funded by the government. Most children stay in school until about age 17. They are Maori schools, which children are taught 51% of the time in their native Maori language. Unfortunately, the Maori don't stay until their final year and usually leave school around 16. Numeracy and literacy have recently become major political issues, particularly as international statistics have revealed that the gap between New Zealand's best and worst achievers is greater than anywhere else in the developed world. It's estimated that 25% of New Zealand students leave school without adequate skills to become competent citizens. There are colleges and trade schools throughout the country that people decide to go to too. There are many observed holidays in New Zealand, some religious and some with cultural ties. I'm going to highlight some of the more foreign ones. Waitangi Day is a Maori holiday. It commemorates the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840, and it was intended to establish peaceful coexistence between the Maori natives and the nearly 2,000 European settlers that immigrated to the country during the 1800s. Although tensions between the New Zealand government and the Maori have ebbed and flowed the last 2 centuries, this day is celebrated throughout the country. Waitangi itself In Waitangi itself, local tribal spokesmen often make speeches dealing with current issues, but the rest of the country's celebration revolves around festivals and concerts, with some marae, which are Maori meeting places, having an open day to explain Maori culture and the way forward for the Maori. Anzac Day is in remembrance of those who served in World War II, marking the day that Australia and New Zealand's Army Corps landed in Gallipoli, Turkey, subsequently throwing them both into World War II. There were many wounded and casualties that day, therefore, the country remembers the fallen and honors the veterans of all services on April 25th. The Queen's birthday is also a very important holiday to New Zealanders because of the strong connection between New Zealand and the British. The country still honors the Queen's birthday and celebrates it as a long weekend. Labor Day in New Zealand is pretty much the same as it is in the United States. It has its origins in the struggle for an 8-hour workday, a right that the country was among the first in the world to claim. The first celebrated Labor Day in New Zealand was in 1899, and it gave trade workers the day off, and although it's much more commercialized today, it's still celebrated in full zeal. The lifestyle of a Kiwi family. Traditionally, the typical family in New Zealand is that of a nuclear one, as defined by Samovar. It's made up of 2 generations, the parents and their unmarried children. Each member of a nuclear family has a series of evolving relationships with every other member. Couples living together in New Zealand are very common. Family plays an arguably more central role in Maori life than it does for New Zealanders of non-Indigenous descent. Maori tradition links individuals and families intricately with the land and each other. Maori have wahanu, or extended families, and typically have much larger families as compared to other cultural counterparts. Men and women are not stigmatized by their specific gender roles, and many men and women take on familial duties. There actually have been significant changes in the courtship and marriage cycles in New Zealand. Before significant contact with the Europeans, wahanu, extended families, were 3-generation groups and both social and economic units. They changed, however, with increased exposure to European law and changing economic influences. It was not until the Child, Youth, and Families Act was passed in 1989 where the wahanu were legally recognized. For Native Islanders, it was very common to have a family at younger ages and typically had no traditional marriage ceremony. After the Second World War, though, there was an increase of policy enactment that incentivized the nuclear and homogenous family through tax incentives and benefits through the federal government. Overall, today New Zealanders have a very Western outlook on dating and contraception and are very open to different relationships and accepting of them as well. Same-sex relationships are common, and they were part of the Indigenous culture well before European immigrants landed during the 1800s. The signing of the Waitangi Treaty in 1840 was originally intended to benefit the Maori people and protect their lands and give their country's sovereignty to that of the British Empire. This, however, has been a point of contention within the last 2 centuries because of the wide range of disparity between the native Maori and the European migrants. Several government and academic studies have indicated increasingly wide disparities in health, economics, employment, and education variables between the Maori and the rest of the nation's people. About 23% of Maori children are in poverty. In recent years, the unemployment rate for the Maori has been roughly double that of the population of the white population of New Zealand, as the education level and internet access. Furthermore, Maori have disproportionately high rates of cigarette smoking, drug and alcohol abuse, obesity, suicide, and homelessness. Economic status can be found through home ownership. Europeans usually live in their own homes, while Maori and Pacific Islanders are more apt to live in a rented accommodation. This is largely due to the fact that one population has more time to pay it off. Because agriculture and tourism are the main sources of jobs in New Zealand, there are many different types of jobs for Kiwis and immigrants from their natural resources, like farming, oil and gas, forestry, and even filmmaking and wine production. New Zealand actually has a great deal of legislation regarding employment. All employees are entitled to a minimum wage, annual leave, public holidays. There are also entitlements to sick and bereavement leave, arrangements for those working on public holidays, and directions to calculating holiday pay. All employees are entitled to minimum 4 weeks annual leave, as well as 11 paid public holidays. Parental leave is available to both partners around the birth of a child and to those adopting a child under the age of 5. Compared to the US, this type of employment legislation is dramatically different, and the US is one of the only countries in the world that doesn't have national maternity leave. It's also common to have a work visa in these parts of the country and have a casual job, particularly in agriculture or as a visiting resident. New Zealand's a beautiful country with different climates and terrains, so the recreation for many of its citizens varies depending on the region. Many Kiwis have baks or sheds, which is equivalent to a beach house or a vacation home. Many Kiwis are active and enjoy the outdoors. They have national parks and areas for outdoor recreation that include biking, hiking, fishing, boating, kayaking, all sorts of sports. By and large, New Zealanders do not have a great deal of leisure time, as most actually have a second job to make ends meet. But one thing that Kiwis love is their sports, and particularly their rugby. It's estimated that 74% of New Zealanders are active sporting enthusiasts, devoting on average 2.5 hours per week to physical activity. Other sports like cricket and soccer are really popular with the younger populations. Much of the traditional food in New Zealand has its roots in Maori culture and its British culture. Native fruits and vegetables like the aubergine, which is the eggplant, or the kumara, which is the Maori word for the sweet potato, are prevalent. With an enormous coastline, New Zealanders have plentiful seafood such as shellfish and native fish species. Wine is also huge in the country, and there are many different types of wineries and different types of productions in that country as well. There are a lot of Western influences in eateries throughout the country, but by national poll, the most favorite meal is actually fish and chips. There's also something to try called New Zealand's national soft drink, which is L&P, which means lemon and Perona, a lemonade type drink that was originally made from the spring waters of Paroa. Coffee shops are also prevalent, with actually having more roasters than anywhere else per capita in the world. Dressing to go out for fine dining is very casual. Unlike in the United States, the restaurants actually have a BYO policy, which is, if you don't know, it's bring your own policy. You can bring your own bottle of alcohol to a restaurant and drink it, and they'll recork it for you for a small fee. Table etiquette is that of the Europeans and the Western cultures, traditional utensil manners, but most settings are very informal and very casual. Tipping is actually not a traditional custom in New Zealand, unless you're in a large city or if you're at a very high-end restaurant. It's becoming more popular in these places, but it's not very common across the country. New Zealand is a mix of different ethnicities, therefore having differing communication styles overall. But traditionally, New Zealand, because of its Western influences, is a culture of low context communication styles. According to our text, this characteristic manifests itself in a host of ways. Western communication, low context, tends to be direct and unambiguous. This is also highlighted in descriptions of communication in New Zealand. For example, the New Zealanders are naturally friendly and helpful, and even more to the point, have time. Ask them a question, and the answer will be carefully considered. They are patient, too, and will clarify at length should the answer not be understood. This is important to note because low context cultures are more reliant on the words that someone says rather than the context that they're saying them in. Kiwis are also very aware of the impact that their communication has and are very politically correct. This has probably arisen because, in a nation of immigrants, The Kiwis have learned to be aware of different backgrounds, to treat others as equals, and to avoid making tasteless comments. They tread carefully and hate to offend. Because New Zealand is a mix of all these different cultures, there are many standard greetings. Handshakes are usually only used on the first encounter. Otherwise, if one is greeting someone that they know, they might go in for a hug or a kiss, but it's all reliant on the comfort level of the individual. The Maori have a traditional greeting called hongi. They ritually greet each other with hongi, and this involves two people pressing their noses together, holding each other's heads, and breathing in simultaneously to share the moment and share the same breath. This is a special greeting and is usually only used for formal Maori events. Meetings and group events in a business setting are very similar to those that are held in the United States. The formalities that are present in every business setting, like introducing yourself by your full name, being tardy is frowned upon, and exchanging business cards, are all customs of New Zealand and other Western cultures as well. Many New Zealanders are very laid back in their appearance, and instances where nicer dress is warranted, it usually goes unnoticed it usually goes unnoticed. Tai Moko is the traditional Maori tattoo art that we're familiar with. Traditionally, men received mata ora on their face as a symbol of nobility. The Maori believe that the head is the most sacred part of the body, therefore, facial tattoos have special significance, and women get these tattoos also on their lips and their chin. Traveling to New Zealand is an event, not just because of the long flights. It actually takes 16 hours direct from Chicago to Auckland. But before arriving into customs, you need to declare your personal items with the Department of Agriculture, especially biologic ones. So if you bring any of these things into the country, they can actually deny you access because they take their biodiversity very seriously. Of course, gestures such as the middle finger and the V for Victory sign are big no-nos in New Zealand. They're greatly offensive. I hope you guys enjoyed my rough draft. It's super long, and I hope you guys have a good day.